A new report from CBS Sports says that they think that the Washington Commanders are going to trade up for Caleb Williams, and that trade up is quote-unquote inevitable here over the next few weeks. I'm going to let you know what I think about that on today's edition of the Commanders Report, and as well, I'm going to let you know whether Justin Fields, the Chicago Bears quarterback, and trading a second-round pick for him is a viable option for the Washington Commanders to fill out their quarterback position in 2024. But before we break down all the news and rumors on today's edition of the Commanders Report, make sure you guys click that subscribe button right now for wall-to-wall coverage for your Washington Commanders throughout this 2024 offseason. Guys, we know how important this offseason is going to be. You got the most cap space out of anybody in the National Football League. You got 5 picks in the top 100. All right, you just hired a new coaching staff. You're going to get a new quarterback. All right, so this is going to be a massive offseason for this franchise. And if you love Washington football and you don't want to miss a single story all season long, we have daily coverage for you guys right here on the Commanders Report, 100% free. So do me a favor right now, click that subscribe button and join our family. So now before we get into Caleb Williams and before we get into Justin Fields, let's go over some news here, which is that Brian Johnson, the former offensive coordinator for those dreaded birds there, the Philadelphia Eagles, has been hired by Dan Quinn, Kliff Kingsbury, and the Washington Commanders to be the next quarterbacks coach / pass game coordinator of this football team, which I'm pretty excited for, man. He's somebody that's we'll go over his profile here in just a second, but they also hired somebody for the defensive side of the ball here, a pass game coordinator for the defensive side of the ball, and that's former Raiders defensive pass game coordinator Jason Simmons, somebody that has a very high reputation around the league, and it certainly seems like new head coach Dan Quinn is starting to assemble quite a staff here in the nation's capital that's really worth getting excited about. So let's talk a little bit about Brian Johnson here because, of course, he was the offensive coordinator there in 2023. He was running Nick Sirianni's offense, and it just didn't really work out. But now he's coming here to Washington, and he's really doing what he does best, which is that he's expected to be the pass game coordinator and the quarterbacks coach, developing whatever quarterback the Washington Commanders end up bringing in for the 2024 season, whether that's a rookie, whether that's a veteran, whether they stick with Sam Howell. Brian Johnson is going to be the guy working with the quarterbacks every single day, and he helped develop Jalen Hurts there in Philadelphia. And you remember, before Brian Johnson got there, Jalen Hurts was not really considered like a high-end quarterback talent, and then all of a sudden in 2022, he becomes an MVP candidate and helps lead the Philadelphia Eagles to the Super Bowl, and now he's got that big contract, and he's a legitimate franchise quarterback. So this guy does have that pedigree of developing quarterback talent here in the National Football League. Now, the main benefits here of hiring a guy like Brian Johnson here to fill this spot is I really like the quarterback development history here in the National Football League. Whoever you bring in here, I trust Brian Johnson to develop them. Number 2, he's got inside info on Philly. All these guys that we're bringing in from Dallas, all these guys we're bringing in from Philly. All these guys have inside information on all the players, the strengths, the weaknesses, and kind of the ways to attack these teams, both offensive and defensively. So bringing a guy in from a rival team to come in here, he knows our staff and he knows our personnel very well, but he also knows their staff and their personnel extremely well. And he might have a little bit of tidbits to give Coach Quinn and Coach Kingsbury to help attack the Philadelphia Eagles moving forward and try to get the Commanders back atop the NFC East in 2024 and beyond. So grade the hire of Brian Johnson for me down there in the comments section. What grade do you give this hire? Do you give it an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F? For me personally, I'm going to give it an A, but let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section for today's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. When that happens, take advantage of that time by answering today's pinned question. So now let's talk about Ryan Wilson and CBS Sports here, where, of course, Ryan Wilson is their main draft analyst there at CBS, and he said that he thinks that the trade-up for Washington to move up to number 1 with the Chicago Bears is quote-unquote inevitable at this point. All right, so let's talk about what Ryan Wilson had to say about the potential trade-up for the USC Trojan quarterback. Even if you slightly overpay, if you've got a guy that you want to build your franchise around with new ownership, with a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator that has a history with him, that's going to keep him happy and have him succeed at the next level, then by all means, go make that move. And then he also says here, I think it is probably eventually inevitable. It does feel like it's going to happen. And then when he was talking about Williams specifically going to assist him with Kliff Kingsbury as the offensive play caller, this is what Wilson had to say. I do think having some familiarity, relationship-wise, but also in the system, will make that transition smoother. It's not going to be easy for anybody, but having familiarity is crucial for any young quarterback. All right, so we just talked about what Ryan Wilson had to say, but now let's talk a little bit about what Adam Schefter from ESPN had to say when he went on the Pat McAfee show earlier this week. And he says, if the Commanders want to trade for Caleb Williams, all right, it's going to cost at least 2 first-round picks. So it's going to cost the number 2 overall pick this year, and it's going to cost the Washington Commanders' first-round pick next year at least. And honestly, guys, I think it's going to be a little bit more than that. But listen, for me personally, okay, guys, and if you guys have watched the show, you guys know I'm a big Caleb Williams fan, all right? I think he's a truly special prospect. I would be on board with trading up for him, all right? I really do think seeing this guy in a Washington Commanders uniform with Kliff Kingsbury as his offensive coordinator, he'd essentially be running the same exact offense he was running there at USC in 2024, makes that transition even easier for him. I think it'd be a perfect fit. I think it'd absolutely be worth trading up, even if you have to give up that extra first-round pick. However, okay, I understand that's a high price, especially to move up just one spot in the NFL draft. I'm also cool with staying put, all right? I'm cool if Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and all these guys are like, you know what? We want to hang on to our draft capital. We want to hang on to our draft picks, and we like Drake May or we like Jaden Daniels, and, you know, we don't see like there being that much of a gap between Caleb Williams and these other 2 options that they have at the number 2 overall spot. Personally, I think Caleb Williams is worth the price to move up, but I'd also be okay with either Drake May and Jaden Daniels because I think they are also worth top 5 picks in the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, what I think a Williams trade would have to look like here for me personally is I do think you're going to have to give up those 2 first-round picks, number 2 overall this year and your first next year, and you're going to have to give up one of your second-rounders. I think that's what Chicago would want. Personally, guys, I think Chicago is probably going to want to take Williams themselves just because I think he's that special of a guy and that special of a quarterback prospect. So, honestly, I don't think it's by any means inevitable that the Washington Commanders are going to end up making this trade. But if, say, Williams says, I'm not going to Chicago, I want to go to Washington, this is the type of deal that the Washington Commanders would need to make in order to get the deal done. Now, coming up here, should the Commanders make a trade with Chicago, but not necessarily for the number 1 pick? Should they go get their current quarterback, Justin Fields, and give up one of their second-round draft picks in order to do it? I'm going to answer that question here in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about today's sponsor at Game Time. And if you're thinking about getting tickets to the big game in Vegas on Sunday, it's not too late, but man, those tickets are pretty darn expensive. So you can use today's sponsor, Game Time, to help getting those expensive tickets just a bit easier, just in time for that big game. For all of our listeners, if you use the code VEGAS100, it's right down there in the bottom right of your screen on the Game Time app, you'll get $100 off to help get your butt to Allegiant Stadium this Sunday to watch the NFC and AFC champions in the Chiefs and 49ers duke it out for the Lombardi Trophy in the biggest game of the year. And not only is Game Time offering that $100 off to the big game in Vegas this weekend, but they are also the fastest growing ticketing app in the country. Game Time boasts the lowest price guarantee on all of their tickets to any event. So it's the only ticketing app that you're going to need on your phone ever. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. Tickets are also sent directly to your phone, another great feature on the Game Time app, so you never have to dig through that email of yours to get your tickets. Snag those tickets without the stress with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code NFLChat for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code NFLChat for $20 off. That code is NFLChat right down there in the bottom right of your screen. So you can check that out right now. And then also, don't forget, Vegas 100 for the code for that $100 off to the big game in Vegas on Sunday. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So now let's talk about Justin Fields here and whether or not he is a viable option for the Washington Commanders to consider to be their next starting quarterback starting in 2024. So let's start with the cap hit here. And honestly, man, Justin is super, super affordable. Okay, so if you get him, you're not on the hook for the signing bonus that he had with Chicago. So he'd be one of the more affordable options available to the Commanders. He'd be less expensive than the first-round pick that they get this year at number 2 overall, and they'd only have to pay him about $3.2 million, a little bit more than that. But hey, man, that's pretty darn good for somebody that was seen as a potential top 5 pick when he was coming out just a few seasons ago. Now, in terms of what he's done in the first 3 years as a National Football League quarterback, it hasn't all been pretty, all right? And my scouting report on him here is that he's got all the tools that you look for, all right? He shows flashes of incredible playmaking instincts. The arm strength is off the charts, all right? The elite rushing ability is on full display. He was actually the most valuable rusher, according to points above replacement in 2022 than any other player in the National Football League, more than Josh Jacobs, more than Christian McCaffrey, anybody. He was the most valuable rusher in football just 2 seasons ago, and he's doing all that, 4.3 speed at 6'3", 228 pounds. However, the mental processing, the accuracy, the decision-making is all kind of a wonky-woozy, all right? It can get very inconsistent over these last 3 years. Now, Chicago's, I'm not a big fan of Luke Getsy, his offensive coordinator. The offensive line's been terrible. The weapons have been hit or miss. You know, DJ Moore is easily the best player he's ever played with. But look at these passing numbers here, man. This guy has gotten better every single year he's been in the league. Last year, he had the highest completion percentage of his career, the most passing yards by over 300 passing yards there. And then the touchdown to interception ratio was decent. You know, in 13 games played, he was dealing with a little bit of an injury. But man, this guy's a special athlete. He's a special thrower of the football. And getting into year 4, if he goes into the right system here with a guy like Kliff Kingsbury and Brian Johnson that can develop that incredible skill set, oh my goodness, this guy could be dangerous. And now going back to Adam Schefter here in that conversation he had with Pat McAfee, he said that Justin Fields is gettable for a high second-round pick. And guess what? The Washington Commanders have 2 of those suckers, all right? So instead of giving up like 2 first-rounders and one of those second-rounders anyway for a guy like Caleb Williams, does it make sense to maybe go out and get Justin Fields, who is also massively talented and also very affordable, for a second-round pick, namely that number 36 overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, I think is what you'd have to give up for him. There's other teams that are going to be interested in Fields, teams like the Steelers, teams like Atlanta, teams like potentially the Las Vegas Raiders. They're going to be on the doorstep trying to get Justin Fields. But if you're the Washington Commanders and you really believe in Fields' talent and you think that you can develop that heading into his 4th year, this is definitely something that's not going to cost you nearly as much in terms of cap space in 2024, which opens up some very interesting opportunities in free agency, but also in terms of draft capital, only having to give up 1 second-round draft pick. And listen, this opens up some opportunities here with that number 2 overall pick. If you have Justin Fields as your starting quarterback in 2024 and you trade for him before the draft, you could get a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the best wide receiver prospects to ever enter the NFL draft at number 2 overall. You would have Marvin Harrison Jr., Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson. That's a scary trio right there, especially if you got a guy like Justin Fields with the kind of talent that he has throwing him the rock. Or if you have Justin Fields, you could decide to trade down for additional picks and continue this rebuild. So you got options here if you go out and get Justin Fields as your next quarterback. So let me know down there in the comments section, would you accept this trade? Would you bring in Justin Fields to be the next quarterback of the Washington Commanders in exchange for the number 36 overall pick? Type yes or no for me down there in the comments section. And right after this, I'm going to let you know what I think about this potential trade idea. All right, so me personally, guys, I'm drafting a quarterback, all right? I just laid out all the reasons why you might think about a guy like Justin Fields, but let's acknowledge the reality. Justin Fields, there's a reason why Chicago is probably going to trade him, all right? There's a reason for that, all right? Not only is Caleb Williams probably a better passer in terms of mental processing and doing all these mental things and the nuances of the position than Fields is right now, but also, man, like that rookie contract is going to be coming to a close here pretty soon. If I were the Washington Commanders and I have an opportunity to draft a guy really high up in this draft class that I really believe in and get him on a new 5-year rookie contract here where I can control his contract for the next 5 years in terms of what he gets paid, I am taking that opportunity. They're younger. They got more years on their rookie contract. And honestly, guys, I think at this point you want to start fresh with a clean canvas here as opposed to going out and getting a Justin Fields. All right, that's going to be it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much for all of your support. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button for nonstop Commanders coverage all throughout the 2024 offseason.